Welcome to the heart of Ireland and the home of Tullamore Dew. My name is Kevin Piggott. I'm the Global Culture and Distillery Ambassador. I'm wearing sunglasses because the sun never stops shining here in Tullamore. Behind me is a distillery we built in 2014. William Grant & Sons invested over 100 million in this state-of-the-art facility. We are the only distillery in Ireland that triple distills 3 styles of Irish whiskey, matures them on the same site, and then bottles and ships them out to the world. We even have a working cooperage. How cool is that? Come inside and let's have a look. The Irish have been making whiskey like bees make honey. It's in our DNA. Here in Tullamore, we've been making whiskey since 1829. When a man called Michael Malloy set up and founded the Tullamore Distillery. In the 1860s, a young man called Daniel Edmund Williams started working here, and he went on to run the distillery and lend his initials to every single bottle. The whiskey then became Tullamore Dew, D.E.W, after Daniel Edmund Williams. An incredible story for a 14-year-old who worked at the distillery and ran it when he was 25. Behind me is the town emblem of Tullamore. A phoenix, adopted in 1785, to symbolise rebirth after the town went through a deadly fire. Its reason for being here is twofold. It reminds us of that tragic date and the resilience of the people, but also excites us about the future of Irish whiskey as it enters this Renaissance period, being one of the fastest growing spirits in the world, and that allowing Tullamore to bring distilling home after 60 years. Follow me now as we go on our whiskey journey that all starts with a single grain. At the start of our whiskey making process, we're trying to access the starch that lies inside each and every one of these grains. Here in Tullamore, we make 3 styles of Irish whiskey: single malt, single pot still, and single grain. The single grain is made with 95% wheat and 5% malted barley. This is quite a sweet floral style of whiskey. The second style is called single malt. It's 100% malted barley. It's a very fruit-led style of whiskey. The third style is called single pot still. This is a very unique and special style of whiskey, unique to Ireland. It is made up of 50% malted barley and 50% unmalted barley. It stems from a time when we were trying to avoid taxes from the English, so we used unmalted barley and malted barley. Here in Tullamore, we do approximately 50-50. This gives a more spicy texture and note on our whiskey when we smell it, and also gives this different viscosity, this beautiful creamy mouthfeel. All these 3 styles come together to make our Tullamore Dew blend that you know and love. So now let's follow the journey as we go from grain to glass. After we mill the grain, which exposes the starch, we begin the next stage of the process called mashing. We do a multiple strike mash temperature here in Tullamore. So that means 55 degrees Celsius or 131 Fahrenheit is our starting point. We add water, our second ingredient, to the mash tun, and we let the 2 mix. What we're doing is allowing the starch to convert to fermentable sugars in a liquid we call wort, W-O-R-T. After about 3.5 hours, the liquid moves over here to our lauter tun. The lauter tun acts like a sieve. It separates our liquid, our clean wort, from the grain. The residual grain, also called draff, is used primarily as animal feed in the farming process. After our lautering tun stage, we move to fermentation. This is where we actually create alcohol for the first time in our process. Here we add yeast, which acts like Pac-Man and eats the sugars and converts them into an alcohol beer. We use a dried powdered yeast. It looks quite like a protein powder that you might be familiar with at home. And that's what we add to our fermenters. They're 30,000 litres. We'll add about 2 boxes, so about 1 kilogram of yeast per 1,000 litres of wort. At the end of our 3-day process, we call this new beer wash. If you haven't guessed by now, you might have realized that Tullamore likes doing things in threes. That's no different for our distillation. We triple distill our liquid to make sure we get that silky smooth characteristic. We create 10 times more flavor in distillation than we do in fermentation. We use the finest copper stills, handmade, hand-beaten, made by Foresight, some of the best still makers in the world. On my left, you have the single malt production. 5 hours, 7 and 11, the alcohol goes from 22 to 55 to 81%, so 162 proof. Okay, so we're getting a very strong, fierce spirit. At this point, the liquid is colorless. It's like moonshine. We call it poitín in Ireland, P-O-I-T-I-N. Okay, so it's a clear, colorless spirit and is, as of yet, not ready to take some of the color from the casks. On this side of our production, we have our single pot still, where we triple distill our liquid also. The key difference is that we have an offset neck still. This allows reflux. Reflux is where some of the droplets, as they distill, catch the roof of the still and they fall back down to be redistilled, creating more and more flavor. It gives us a higher ester profile on our distillate. So this is a 1954 replica of our original still. The offset neck is a very unusual and rare architectural design in stills. Here we have our 3-sided spirit safe, which is very unusual, representing each stage of our distillation. We take each of the distillate and cut it into 3, the head, the heart and the tail. The heart is the most pure and flavoursome part of the distillate that we want to capture to continue to the next stage of distillation, but eventually after the 3rd distillation to make its way into a barrel. It'll be brought down to 64% alcohol by volume or about 128 proof. Then it will rest for many years before it becomes the final product, Tullamore Dew. For our grain whiskey, we undergo a similar process of milling to distilling, albeit not identical. As you can see, the stills behind me, our coffee or column stills, are different to our pot and malt stills. They operate on a 24-hour continuous basis, and the liquid cascades down much like a waterfall, chamber by chamber. As the liquid moves from the analyzer to the rectifier to the purifier, the alcohol increases in volume to be a higher ABV or proof than the liquid that is found in the copper pot stills. This distillation technique is a much more modern form of distillation. Ironically, is what the Scots used to gain the upper hand on Irish whiskey back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In the late 1940s, Desmond Williams, grandson of Daniel Edmund Williams, brought column stills here to Tullamore. Today we use this combination of modern and traditional stills to bring about the best combination of liquids and flavours we can to make our wonderful triple blend. Welcome to Warehouse 2. This is where we keep some of our most rare and valuable whiskies. Some of the whiskies in here are older than me. To be an Irish whiskey, we must mature it for at least 3 years, but much of our whiskey is matured for longer than that. We need to mature the whiskey in these barrels to slowly mellow out and round out those nuances as it gathers all this character, this flavour, this aroma. We use 3 types of casks for making our triple blend: ex-bourbon, ex-Irish and ex-sherry casks that all come together to make the triple blend you know and love. Imagine, 10 of these whiskies are drank every second around the world. From humble beginnings, we've come a long way. Whether you drink your Tullamore Dew in an Irish coffee, a Tully and tonic, an old-fashioned, or even with ginger ale, there's no judgment here. I like my whiskey on the rocks, but the best way to enjoy whiskey is the way you prefer. Don't let anyone ever try and tell you otherwise. So now for a toast. May the roof above never fall in, and the friends below never fall out. Sláinte.